Good morning, everybody.
Hello.
It is June 24th, and we're on episode 56, wherein we talk about toppling white Jesus.
So, episode 56, I think we now qualify for the senior discount.
With AARP,
Yeah, or whatever.
the American Association of Retired Podcasts.
Retired. There you go. Retired podcast. All right. Yeah. Good morning, Kathleen. So, yes. So here we are. We're taking on what may be the most controversial topic, that
From yesterday.
annoying white picture of Jesus that's in every Protestant church in America.
Yeah, I don't have any white pictures of Jesus, but I do have.
It's back.
I'm okay toppling him. I don't use him for reverential purposes. Just for those who don't know, well, we should probably introduce ourselves.
Yes.
I'm Mark Van Steenwyk. I'm the director for the Center for Prophetic Imagination.
And I'm Daniel Wolpert. I direct Micah, the Minnesota Institute of Contemplation and Healing.
Yeah, and so yesterday, I think it was Shaun King, who we could have a whole other episode about him. I'm not advancing him as a writer or journalist, but he's sparked a conversation by saying, you know what, we should tear down statues of white Jesus next. Basically, he said that because they're tools of white supremacy. Of course, predictably, right-wing media freaked out and started saying he's like a representative of Black Lives Matter, which is not. It's not true. He did come to fame in the wake of the Ferguson uprising, so there's a connection to be made there, but he's not a spokesperson for anything. And then, of course, it caused conversation among a broader swath of people who are like, this just goes too far. Some people saying, bring it. And then all kinds of other nuanced conversations can be had about how representation of the divine, how much has Christianity been complicit in white supremacist culture, all kinds of fruitful conversation to be had. So I figured let's dive in.
Let's dive in. Yeah. And and I do think that has got to be the starting point, right? I mean, if we just start from the statues, or paintings or stained glass windows, we don't really get anywhere, I don't think, in an intelligent manner. To me, the real question is, okay, why are there all these white Jesuses? Why are we attached to them? And how has Christianity in America been complicit in white supremacy? And I wanted to pitch, I pitched some books on here. I'm a big book person. And, we use this term mind-blowing all the time, often too much so. But I want to pitch this book. So this is called Killers of the Dream by Lillian Smith.
Lillian Smith.
Yeah. And this is the 1994 version, which is the one that you can easily get a hold of now. This really is a mind-blowing book, and it has a fascinating history. So Lillian Smith is a white woman in the South. She was actually born in 1897, I think. And she wrote this book in 1949. And it was not banned, but it was almost banned. And it really didn't sell. And they tried to release it again in 1956. Same thing happened. And so as a result, most people have not heard of this book. And it is so explosive in terms of connecting racism, sexism, and American Christianity in one place, that just as one example of this, a teacher of mine who became a friend and colleague, James Noel, who is a professor of preaching and history at San Francisco Theological Seminary, died tragically at a very young age. Black man. He tried to have the seminary faculty read this together as like a little book study, and they refused to do it. Which I thought was pretty amazing. But I do just want to read one quote out of here where she talks about this whole issue and how white people in the South were impacted by this combination of Christianity and racism. And so she's talking about revivalists and what revivalists would say to poor white people. And so here's the quote. Listening to the words of revivalists and demagogues, the poor white, despite his misery, believed himself important among men, for Jesus had died for him, and his white blood made him superior to all other people. She uses the N-word, foreigners, and Jews. All you had to do was to believe in Jesus and to hate all unbelievers to be saved in heaven, and to believe in white supremacy and to hate and shun all who are different to be set apart here on earth as supreme. Oh, wash me and I shall be whiter than snow, yes, whiter than snow, was a song crooned by millions to lull themselves into one vast communal daydream in order to escape a too hard reality.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so I think we need to really understand how Christianity has been co-opted by whiteness in America, because that helps us to understand why getting rid of a statue, which is obviously an unrepresentative representation of Jesus, why getting rid of that would distress people so much.
Now, there's comments are starting to come in, but it's interesting because there's a couple different facets to this. One is I've seen a lot of people say, well, we shouldn't have statues of Jesus at all, or any statue should just be Jewish looking. And to me, that kind of misses part of it. Because, if all things were equal, which they are not, white representations, or better put, different European representations of Jesus wouldn't trouble me. In fact, I don't think when people are saying topple white Jesus, they mean we should burn all existing copies of the Book of Kells, because we recognize that pre-colonial Irish depictions of Jesus aren't what we're talking about here. We're talking about this colonial artifact of whiteness. Although there's another case to be made for maybe we shouldn't have representations at all, or if we do, they should be historically accurate. I don't think that's the point Shaun King and most people are making. I think most people are talking about white Jesus, which is different than ancient European depictions. Because this whole conversation of what is whiteness is a big one, but this idea that there's a specific culture, Western civilization, that's bound up in whiteness that has the right to conquest and dominate the world. There's no way to separate that narrative of white conquest from white Jesus at all. And so all these artifacts that going to any church in Minnesota, just about, you're going to see white stained glass Jesus images. That all reinforces cultural and racial hegemony. That's what.
And so this is Kathleen's got a great example.
Yeah, this one.
It's really beautiful.
Kathleen writes, at my last appointment, a parishioner requested that we use brown bread since the body of Christ is not all white. I said, okay. She brought pumpernickel. I like pumpernickel. It's not going to lie. All hell broke loose. Some people actually spit it out. It was one bite of bread.
Right. Yeah. So, that's a perfect example here of what we're talking about, right? I mean, that this whiteness is so baked into these people's Christianity that this notion of, eating a black body or a representation of a black body is so unbelievably offensive that you have to spit out communion bread. So we really need to look at that. I mean, that, we've talked a lot on this about the issue of formation.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, that is you are deeply formed on a subconscious level, an unconscious level, to have that degree of emotional reaction to a different colored communion bread.
Yep. That's right.
Gus is jumping on here.
My fave tweet so far about this week from Muslim where he said some conservative Christian asked him, well, how would you like statues of Muhammad torn down? There's a lack of religious and cultural awareness right there.
Yeah, so for those of you who aren't aware, there aren't any statues of Muhammad.
Before you know it, they're going to be burning down all the Quaker cathedrals too.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh,
that's
indeed.
great. Yeah. Yeah. So
John writes, I'm old. Please display the title and author again.
Okay. So we've got Killers of the Dream by Lillian Smith. As I said, this is the edition that's available on Amazon. It's 1994. This to me is a must-read book. And I've had people read this book and then they come back to me with this kind of stunned expression on their face, and it really, again, it gives this remarkably powerful picture of how these different threads of isms have been woven together in our American understanding.
Here's a question from CK Todd. Is the statue of Rio in Rio white Jesus? I'm pulling this up because I think this is a great example here. So let's see. I got to share my screen, application window. Technology at work. Okay, here we go. So that's the statue. I can't see that as anything but, this is tricky because this means something to a lot of people who are not white in Rio, but at the same time, this is no doubt a statue to show the supremacy of Christ, and it is a European Jesus over a non-European place in the world, right? So was this statue built for any other reason besides some sort of Christian supremacy tied up in white supremacy? I mean, I don't think, it's hard for me not to see it as that. Maybe there's some historian who could put some spin on it, but.
Well, yeah, and and it's very interesting. I mean, having traveled around the world and spent a lot of time going to different churches, going to different communities, there is a real difference between in the feel and the ethos when you're in a place like, let's say, Indonesia, which is majority Muslim, but there are Christians there. So going to a place like Indonesia and going into a church that looks just like a church in Europe, and going to a church that actually looks like an Indonesian building, where the depictions of Jesus and the disciples on the wall look like Indonesians as opposed to looking like white people. That is a very different energy, and one clearly feels like an imposed from the outside colonial religion, and the other one feels like a much more indigenous outpouring and expression of the faith as adopted by local people. And as I said, I've seen this all over the world, and it really does make a difference, right? And for those who say, again, for those white people in America who say, oh, it doesn't make a difference, that really is the position of whiteness. It doesn't make a difference to you because you're the one on the wall. It does make a difference to other people.
Joyce writes, I preached a message once titled Euro Jesus in our predominantly white church. LOL. Yeah, there were a lot of people who did not like that. I mean, this is the thing. I mean, I remember, okay, so I went to Northwestern College. It's not the cool Northwestern University in Chicagoland, the one in St. Paul, Minnesota, fundamentalist school. And I remember taking a theology class in there. I was in their adult degree completion program. And at the time, I was extremely conservative, but I had some understanding of missiology. And so I raised the question in our class. It's like, it seems like there are different ways of interpreting the Bible. And they said, no, there's just one way. And this started this whole conversation, and literally the entire theology program was convinced that there's the way that we teach Christianity in Western culture has nothing to do whatsoever with whiteness or European culture. There's no contextualization at all. We only have to contextualize when we preach it elsewhere, because we've inherited we're the true trunk. And that logic, even though I don't think most people, if they thought about it, would agree with that. But that's the kind of the operative logic we have with our Christianity. We just think that white Euro Jesus is normal Christianity. So when somebody gets upset and says, or maybe even they have a picture of a black Jesus on the wall, it freaks white people out because it seems like they're messing with Jesus. It's almost impossible for them to see that the Jesus they have was already messed with.
Yeah. Yeah, and and this also it gets to, and I mentioned this last time, but I really do think it's worth bringing up again. This reality of America being so young that we don't get that these sorts of changes of public art, public icons are just very, very common, right? And I don't remember if I talked about it here. I know I just wrote about it. This reality of the cathedral in Florence, where there's a museum right next door that houses the second largest collection of Christian art in the world. The Vatican is the only one that has more. And every single piece of art in that museum has come out of the cathedral. Right? And these are incredible pieces of art. Like, most of them are nicer than any art in any church in America. I mean, there's Donatello statues and, remarkable frescoes and incredible altar cloths and pieces. There's the entire outside of the church has been redone 3 times, right? There are these huge life-size statues of saints, and it's not like crappy art. I mean, it's beautiful stuff. Mm-hmm. And, people have changed it over the years for all kinds of different reasons. And so, this idea that we cannot change these things as we change and as our understanding of our faith changes and as we wake up and become formed in a different way is just preposterous. I mean, it really is. It's absolutely absurd. We have to change these things because we change and our understanding of our faith changes.
Maria writes, the statue in Rio has a certain amount of vulnerability to it, which opens it up to being reinterpreted. I don't know enough about the statue, and I'm not an art historian to be able to respond to that. But just to me, from outside of that culture, it seems like a giant statue put there by the church to show some sort of church dominance. That's how I interpret it, but I'm open to other interpretations. Jessica writes, it's like all of white privilege. We don't realize that our imagination theology of Jesus comes culture-laden and fraught with a million implications for others, and how instructive it is for white people to meditate on a different Jesus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And so that's, again, for those of us inside the white bubble, there is this incredible lack of awareness that we need to undo, we need to move through. And again, this is what spiritual practice does and helps us with. This is what revolutionary thinking and reflecting and studying does. The whole praxis of liberation theology, right, is about that we begin to see and hear all these stories in new ways. And that opens us up to getting rid of our idols, right? I mean, the sin that is mentioned the most in the Bible is idolatry. It's not homosexuality or adultery or any of the current culture wars sins. It's idolatry, right? And so there is a massive amount of idolatry within the church, and it's not just statues of white Jesus. It's the clock that my grandmother donated. It's the way the communion table is set up. It's all of these little things that we become attached to and we turn into God. right? And so to get rid of those is to actually practice getting rid of the sin of idolatry.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting. So when this story first broke, I learned about it from, I have a lot of random Facebook friends that I don't even know. Sometimes you say yes to people because you got mutual friends, and several different people shared, some scare article about Shaun King saying we need to tear down white Jesus. And the comments were increasingly white supremacy in a way that was jarring. And I'm like, how did I end up with these people as friends? But one of the comments was, see, BLM, Black Lives Matter, are Satanists. Another person actually said, look, Black people are 20% of this culture. White people are 80%. We can take them, right? Those comments were next to each other. And neither of those people, like no one in the thread challenged either of these statements. And so it's like, of course, I don't think everyone thinks who is against the statues thinks both of them, but I think it's part of the suit. Like this is the reality. Tearing down a white Jesus, you might find it distasteful. I can understand saying, I don't like destruction of art. That just feels Nazi-ish. I get that impulse. Okay, that's a whole other conversation. I don't exactly agree with it. But when someone reacts violently and calls anyone who would threaten a white statue of Jesus satanic, then it shows that there's a white statue of Jesus in their heart that they're trying to defend. And that's the white statue of Jesus that I think we're mostly afraid of, because white supremacist Christianity is extremely toxic, and it's rooted in every denomination. Every white denomination in this country is tainted with it big time.
Yeah. And the other thing about the whole tearing down the statues thing, it's like, fine, remove them nicely and put them in a museum and talk about them. I mean, I don't think we need to break these statues, and if some of them we want to keep as representational of a certain time, and great, fine, put them away somewhere. But in terms of our worshiping communities and what we're trying to cultivate, that's a whole different issue and question. Comments are coming in fast and furious. Adam, if you post after 30 minutes, we're not going to read your comment.
Yeah, Adam, you're out there listening. We know how you roll. Colin writes, the author Jared Yates Sexton has done some excellent recent research, much of it compiled in Twitter threads recently, on the development of white Jesus as America uses him, growing out of the theocratic strain within the Confederated States of America's self-concept. To them, God himself was a white supremacist who had appointed the white as a kind of new Adam to subdue the world. Now, that's a great point, because I think a lot of white Americans don't think they're white supremacists, but if you just replace the word white with America, then they might track with it. Somehow that God has favored America. They don't realize that that is itself a white supremacist thought. Right. This idea that this nation founded on Christian principles, that is like, because a lot of, when I was growing up, I knew better than to say Black people are less than white people. So I actually said, like, along with other people like Rush Limbaugh, that it just so happens that white culture is better than Black culture, as though that's somehow a different statement. And so when you start tying in Western culture, reaching its apex with America, and that being America being kind of the top shelf in God's mind, then that's still just a white supremacist concept. And if you really believe, as many people do, that American Christianity has a special burden to evangelize the world, then you're talking about white supremacy.
Yeah. And Colin, what this guy is talking about and what you're sharing is a lot of what Lillian Smith goes through in this book. Yeah. And again, it's so amazing that she was doing this in 1949, when basically this was certainly not something that white people talked about much at all. Was quite amazing and got a lot of people mad at her.
John writes, you should be encouraged that your promotion of Killers of the Dream has led to a buying frenzy so that it's out of stock on Amazon until June 29th. Well done. You're a trend maker, Dan.
I'm a trend maker. Yeah, too bad I can't get the same thing to happen with donations to Micah and CPI. Mark, we're nowhere close to the 20 million we talked about yesterday. I hate to tell you.
I mean, all it takes is one person donating 20 million. So if you're out there, actually, two people. One to donate 15 million to you, and then one to donate 5 to me would be
That's
good.
right.
I want.
There you go.
Yeah, sure. Susan writes, "White statue of Jesus in their heart. That's the new metaphor of hard-hearted." I mean, a stone statue is hard.
Yeah.
So hard-hearted.
Yeah, and and again, of course, this is what the issue of idolatry is about. This is the problem, right? Is that God being invisible and unformed, um, that's really hard for human beings, and so we replace that with all kinds of idols because we want something solid that makes us feel good. And whether it starts out with the golden calf and all kinds of other stone statues and morphs into the statues of white Jesus, that's what people do. That's what we do. And so, to see this not as some culture war, but to actually see this as a spiritual practice. Like what if we did take down all of the idols related to our faith, and started to replace them with other things, including, and as we've talked about in terms of what do white people do, right? Well, we create a new set of relationships, and to me, the issue, for example, with Rio and that statue, well, what do you do? Well, it's not even so much what that statue looks like; it's who put that statue there. I guarantee you it was not the indigenous and poor people and black people in Rio that put that statue there. It was the white people that colonized Brazil, the Europeans that colonized Brazil. And so to me, the issue is not just, oh, that statue looks like white Jesus, so we take it down. No, it's an issue of relationships and who's in charge. And so what would the indigenous people of Brazil say about a statue on that hill? Maybe that in and of itself is offensive for some reason. And so we start to have a whole new relationship with who gets to decide things. And that's the deeper point.
Context matters. Like racism isn't about skin color only. I mean, this is where people like, right. Oh, I don't believe in hating people because of the color of their skin. Yeah, but if they look and act a certain way, you're upset at them. You want all the black people to act like Bill Cosby. Like that's still racism. Right? That because I mean I grew up with that thinking too. Like, oh, I don't hate all black people. I just hate black culture. And Michael Jordan's okay. Like that. There's all kinds of racist crap like that in our thinking. And so the issue isn't that, oh, I have a picture of Christ in the bread lines, the Fritz Eichenberg woodcut of he's a Catholic worker artist. That picture of Jesus as a homeless person looks kind of white, so should I destroy it? No, because we know what's going on there. That's not contextually a form of white supremacy in that image. That's not why it was created. So I think we can be sophisticated in thinking about this. Like there's a reason why crosses are higher than all their buildings in our town. It's to show the supremacy of Christ. If you replace them all of a sudden with sickles or the moon crescent, white people would freak out. So just it's not hard to think about this stuff, folks.
Let's see, Carson is into smashing everything.
It's an iconoclastic Presbyterian smash every second commandment violation. I'm sympathetic to that, but I don't want to upset my Catholic and Eastern Orthodox friends too much.
I just saw a post from a Mennonite this morning. Hi, Mennonite here. You'll be fine without your statues.
Yeah, the only images of Jesus I've seen have been in Mennonite churches where they bought like a Lutheran church and moved into it, which is what Faith Mennonite Church is like.
There we go.
So good to see this conversation happening. We aim to reach. Max writes, as a queer person, queer theologian, I keep reading this as topping white Jesus. Comment of the day. It is Pride Month.
Okay, Max.
Thank you for that. Some people are going to Google to figure out what you're talking about. I bet you.
Yeah, go for it.
But also, this is a great topic. Thanks for featuring it. Maria Kirby, the church has periodically practiced a purge of statues. We have lost a lot of art that way. I mean, that happens with iconoclasm, and I'm sympathetic to it because oftentimes these are revolutionary acts. So when you have relatively powerless people throwing off oppressors and they destroy statues, I know it's a loss of art, but there are worse things than losing art.
Yeah. Well, and we don't have enough place to keep all the art anyway, so it's all right.
But that is a huge conversation. How do we respect art and culture in a way that recognizes oppression? It's a big topic worth having. Colin, this looks like this might be the last comment.
Yes.
For reference, Sexton's umbrella title for how this Confederate Christianity has survived into the present is the cult of the shining city. He traces an ideological and historical line from the Confederacy all the way to Trump, with some very interesting notes on Reagan's peppering in of the 20th century American occultism to this cult mythology. That's fascinating. I'm kind of curious about the way that worked outside the Confederacy too. Like, because the thing is, like, blue-eyed Jesus. Okay, so immigrants coming over from Sweden with blue-eyed Jesus is problematic, but it becomes more problematic when those Swedes became dominant in a culture and started doing genocidal things. So it's fascinating, like how quickly cultural representation, which seems okay, can become toxic.
Right. Yeah. And then of course the other thing that we usually don't think about, because we don't think about, again, what we don't see. Right. And so we might get distressed, like, oh, this one piece of art is going to get destroyed. Well, what we don't see are the thousands of pieces of art that never got put up in the first place.
Yeah.
And the thousands of pieces of art that were made by people who are on the outside of what is dominant and normative.
There's a lot of suppressed art out there.
Yeah. So anyway, thanks for all the great comments as always. We've blazed through our half an hour, and so I hope you have a great day. And if we had really sophisticated production capability at this point, we would fade sound wise into the Plastic Jesus soundtrack, which is an awesome song. So you could look that up and listen to it, and Mark will show you his Plastic Jesus. Yeah. And you can glue it to the dashboard of your car.
Don't forget to check us out tomorrow.
Bye.